Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, How AI-Powered Consumer Messaging Can Help You Engage and Retain More Customers, sponsored by Kahuna, provider of cross-channel marketing automation and AI solutions for digital marketers. I'm Chris Rand, Research Analyst for the eTail event series. Before we dive in, I'd like to bring your attention to the console in front of you. The windows or widgets laid out on the screen are customizable, and you can move these around to maximize, minimize, or reposition them to fit whatever device you're using to connect with us. We're going to try and save 15 minutes or so at the end of today's discussion for a Q&A session. So at any point during the discussion, feel free to submit questions using the portal. And now I'd like to introduce Samir Patel, CEO of Kahuna, who will be leading today's discussion. Samir?
Hey, Chris, thanks very much. Thank you for having us. Thanks, everyone, for joining. I'm going to just take a couple of minutes to go around the table and do an introduction to the amazing panelists that we have. My name is Samir Patel. I'm the CEO of Kahuna. Kahuna is a marketing automation platform designed to help some of the most modern brands on the planet make really intelligent decisions about who to engage with, when to engage, what time, what device, and begin to start to connect with every consumer, not in batches and blasts, but as audiences of one. Kahuna, the way Kahuna works is we process events of as high as 1 billion events on a daily basis to be able to truly understand consumers' behaviors, what they like, what they don't like, their behavior preferences, their purchase preferences. And we've invested about 6 years of R&D in machine learning and artificial intelligence to figure out exactly how to engage with them on their terms. So that's the last time I talk about sort of, what Kahuna does. We're going to try to use some of the experiences we have across some of the most modern brands we've been privileged to serve. But let me first get started by getting the other panelists up here. They're from phenomenal companies doing iconic things. And we're going to start with Brett Goldberg, co-CEO of TickPick. Brett, can we get a quick intro, please?
Yeah, thanks for having me. So I'm the co-CEO and co-founder of TickPick. We are a ticket marketplace similar to StubHub, but better. And what makes us better is ultimately cheaper tickets for consumers, and that's by charging lower fees. We utilize algorithms to help people figure out what are the best deals on tickets. So looking at the seat location and price and making a recommendation on which seats they should buy. We also have a bidding platform that allows people to name their price. And then ultimately it also comes down to, besides the UX, UI, and the customer experience, then also customer support. And we pride ourselves on having the best customer support team here, all based in New York City. So that's just a quick rundown on TickPick.
That's awesome. Thank you, Brett. Rich. Rich is the CMO of Swap.com. Rich, introduce yourself, please.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for having me. This is Rich Lesperance. I am with Swap.com. And we're the largest online consignment and thrift store. We have over 2 million items, so mostly secondhand clothing for men, women, and kids, based out of Chicago. And I'm excited to be here today.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Rich. Really happy to have you as well. Ted, can you tell us a little about Oolala and what your role is, please?
Sure. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Ted Silverman. I'm the Director of Communications here at Oolala. Roo is an online off-price style destination that connects brands with what we call the next-gen shopper. So some of our key competitors that other folks may know would be companies like Gilt, Nordstrom Rack, Zulily. And we cover a lot of fashion, but is also home and travel and entertainment types of brands and offerings that are all at discounted prices for our members. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, so we're really here to celebrate, in my mind, what we call the iconic market here, right? Every one of these fantastic panelists, in their own way, are elbowing their ways into very established competitive markets, and they've all made a serious dent. They've all made a name for themselves, and so I really thought that we could take this whole discussion in many ways, but we're going to hone it down to just talk about 3 things to help get some really tangible output for folks who've taken the time to join us today. The first thing is, just broadly speaking, how are some of the most modern brands like the ones we have on the phone today rethinking their marketing approach? If you go back and look at any company that's looking to enter a new space or re-engineer or digitally transform what they do as a business, if you're more of a traditional brand, there's sort of only 3 levers, 2 of 3 levers that you can pull. You can either be cheaper, you can have an unique IP that nobody else has, or you can find a way to outdo your competition with superior customer engagement and understanding. Usually it's rare that a company can pull off all 3, and it's sort of, it's 2 of those 3 that let you make a big splash. So I want us to spend some time today talking about how every one of these amazing brands are rethinking their approach to customer experience. I know that that's an important lever for every one of the companies that are here, and so we want to cover that in detail. The second thing is, let's get specific about what are the metrics that matter to modern marketeers. I mean, marketing is one of those functions where it's sort of easy to come in and subconsciously just do what you did yesterday or last year, but none of the brands that we have here are just sort of sticking to the old ways of doing stuff and are actually every day coming to work maniacally focused on a consumer experience, and I'd love to have them share with everybody else how they've shifted those metrics in their business. And then finally, it'd be great to get your advice, the panelist advice, and share that with everybody else, and definitely discuss that in the Q&A as well. But you guys are, modern brands today, and some of you guys on the phone definitely are doing this as well. You're sort of in a constant stare down with Amazon every day, and it'd be great to learn, what are some of the iconic marketers doing to either shift the goalpost or deal with this sort of imminent threat. So I think if we cover those 3 things, we'll have had used everyone's time really wisely. So as we get into this, I just want to spend a few minutes doing setup. Surprise, surprise, the e-commerce is growing online. If anybody hadn't really sort of seen the stat, I mean, I think the thing that is still quite staggering to me is, 20 odd years into e-commerce, we're still seeing growth rates like 15%. So, it's not just that it's growing, but it's growing pretty exponentially. I think the second thing to me, though, that is most interesting as we enter what, we'll talk about this in a minute, but what we call sort of the third phase of digital commerce is we aren't just trying to outdo the next competitor with better traditional e-commerce, right, which has now existed for 20 years. And so, a bunch of subcategories within commerce have emerged right now. We sort of look across the bend and say e-commerce as we knew it before is getting fragmented, if you will, into multiple subcategories, which can look like a headache to a lot of companies trying to compete, but it can also spell opportunity for a lot of the modern brands trying to understand how do we play in the next round of e-commerce and be able to, again, elbow our way into a pretty crowded market. So, marketplaces, which was sort of a cute idea only a couple of years ago, is accounting for almost, half of all of digital spend happening right now, and within 5 years, Forrester expects that it'll rise up to almost 2/3. It's a place and a business we understand really, really well, and we're privileged to have some of the most iconic, marketplaces in our customer role, and I'm happy to share some of the things we learned from there. Subscriptions is another example of another variant of traditional e-commerce. Where in 2014, from 2014 to 2017, we've almost seen an 800% growth in folks who actually visit sites that are subscription-based. And again, a category that Kahuna is extremely familiar with the likes of companies like the Dollar Shave Club that, we're privileged to serve. I'd love to say that we were experts at this all along, but the reality is we've actually learned a ton from all of the customers we've worked with as we sort of matured the product, and I'm happy to share some of that stuff as well. And then again, we've seen lifestyle companies and share economy grow, but there's no question that everyone who is doing really, really well in any of these subcategories right now is putting their consumer at the center of the design process. So they're not driving marketing automation and marketing technology decisions based on, just how many campaigns can I push out, but they're truly, truly trying to understand how their consumer wants to engage with us. And so, it's really the sort of the third round three that you see on the slide that we're here to talk about. But if you put all of it in context, we feel from what we see is, we've sort of entered a third phase of commerce. The first one, which was obviously, e-commerce to brick and mortar, and in many ways we're still feeling the effects of that. I mean, I think in 2017 we had over 3,500 stores that shut. So there's still that, that evolution is still well underway. The second round, as we see it, was a round that was largely driven by, the birth of these variants of subscription of e-commerce models. For example, subscription economy powered by mobile. What does mobile do to allow you to engage in a very different way? And how do you find a different model to actually engage with the customer? So on one hand, it could be you took an older product and you turned the business model from a, buy this when you need it, to a subscription model. Or we saw a ton of brands like Revolve Clothing and Warby Parker, and where you saw a lot of vertical integration across the supply chain. So, you saw companies saying, look, I'm going to control the experience all the way from production to delivery, and I'm going to find that, find a niche that is large enough for me to build a viable business doing that. We're seeing a third phase come, which is really a build on the second phase right now, which is you will do all those things, but there are two new trends that have come up in the last 5 years that allow you to sort of move to the next level of e-commerce. And those two trends are, the first one is, technologically, we are now at a point where we can truly understand billions and billions of consumers, every behavior of them within milliseconds. And that was really the sort of the reason why Kahuna came to be. Where you could build out large-scale systems that could understand within milliseconds, a new item that someone looked at. They looked at it 3 times this week. They looked at it, they put it in the shopping cart. They looked at it, they didn't put it in the shopping cart. Those are not things that should take you 1 day, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and sometimes even longer to figure out. So machines and the systems got better at being able to make sense of consumers, much faster. Artificial intelligence allowed us to do stuff for them. And perhaps more important than all of that, which triggered a third round, is that as consumers, every one of us just has a very different expectation of what a brand needs to do for us to be engaged with them. Every consumer is fickle, can be fickle. Your competitor's mobile app is right one click away from your mobile app on their phone. What are the things that they're expecting from us, given the amount of digital breadcrumbs we all leave today in terms of our preferences, the expectation that you will employ modern technology, which is real time, which is machine learning based, to really, really respect the pace at which they want to move, is a reality that sort of exists right now. And, we can go on about the theories of this stuff and talk about how, whether it's, is it a technology-led revolution or not, but I think the stats on this page kind of just sort of do most of the talking. The reality is for brands that are not embracing the pace at which a consumer wants to traverse their purchase journey, the results are pretty clear right now. These are hard stats that show, that 91% of consumers are unsubscribing for emails. Every vendor is not going to tell you, or every, the supplier is not going to tell you that they see these things, but more and more of them are starting to see this. One and done purchases, given the cost of customer acquisition for any e-commerce brand, is lethal. And then finally, Google shared a pretty interesting stat that said $280 billion worth of stuff is still left in abandoned shopping carts. So, the question becomes, how are we starting to figure out, a more modern, rethought through way of dealing with every consumer? And then there's Amazon. We're going to talk a lot more about that stuff, but that kind of sort of breaks out, the 4 big things that we're looking at. So as a setup to the questions that I want to bring the panelists in for, the theme here is, how do we rethink the relationship with your consumer? And we wanted to really talk about 4 topics here in detail to figure out exactly what are the 4 things that that we want to look at. So first thing is taking the time to understand, the consumer, which is moving from sort of a batch and blast mentality to truly slowing down the pace and actually having the systems in place to listen to the consumer before you start to figure out how to speak to them. So customer centricity comes from your ability to out-listen as much as to out-engage. How are you guys thinking about that? So that's a topic we're going to cover. The second one is, modern technology lets you really move the dial on what percentage of your engagement needs to be demographic versus behavioral. I think we've got some, really great stories amongst the panelists here about some who are somewhere in the middle, others who are native to behavioral. They started doing this during a time where behavioral was invented, and that's all they do. The third piece is extreme personalization. Again, how do you get to a point where every individual is not part of a segment or a cohort, but you have scalable systems to be able to truly engage with them as what we call an audience of one? And then finally, AI might be, I jokingly call AI the new kale. It is the most interesting, it's the most sort of popular, trendy thing that everybody wants to talk about. The reality is, it's a lot of noise for marketeers trying to go through their day every day. And so we've got 4 or 3 amazing marketeers on the phone right now. Let's talk about how you guys are looking at it, where you see value, where you don't. So with that, I want to bring the panel in. The first question here is about consumer centricity. How should marketers be rethinking sort of a sort of a batch and blast marketing mindset, and move more towards one-to-one, to sort of one-to-one consumer-centric approach? And this, by the way, one thing at Kahuna we firmly believe is this isn't a binary discussion about, lose all of the old ways of doing marketing and just run the new ones. We have to let every customer, and that's how we're architected, to let every customer adopt and consume more modern ways of working at the pace that they think their consumers want. So before we get into that, I'm just setting the ground rule. Like, this is not about, you have to be religious about either one side, but I would love, and Rich, we're going to start with you, talk to us about how you look at sort of both the evolution of the ability to go from batch and blast to one-to-one, but superimpose your real needs on a day-to-day basis of being able to use both these levers. What are your thoughts on that, Rich? Can you kick us off, please?
Sure. Well, I've been through a lot of transitions like that, where you take your email program, for example, and you've got large campaigns that deliver the goods, that deliver the revenue. And a lot of the one-to-one campaigns initially are very small. So, there's probably one camp in your company that might dismiss it as not being significant enough. And there's maybe another camp that's so in love with personalization that they want to kill these large campaigns that make all the money. And neither approach is really correct. I think that you have to build, you have to really build the one-to-one messaging over time, but it's okay to keep sending larger sends. I mean, the term batch and blast kind of makes me cringe, but, certainly large segmented campaigns that are, if you send an email saying free shipping one day only, everyone's going to get more sales that day, and you make your numbers for the quarter. So I think that's important not to throw one out for the other. And there's kind of a mythology that there's a binary choice there.
Yeah. I'd be interested, you provided us with sort of one example of free shipping. Can you talk about the other side? Like, where have you seen, whether you guys are doing it now or it's on your, your evil plans for the rest of the year, what are circumstances where you're starting to see one-to-one is a better way to do it now that the technology is here?
Well, you talked about events, and I think the new currency for marketers when it comes to how you do one-to-one well, it's really about tagging. It's really about the world of understanding what events you're going to tag. You as a marketer now, you don't have to spend so much energy coming up with some crazy creative promotion idea. And it's hard to turn that off. It's almost like muscle memory. It's like, well, we could do 35% off this, or we could do a tiered offer. We could do a 10 off if you spend 20, and 30 off if you spend 100. And like those are good skills, and certainly it's good to know those things and what works. But one-to-one is all about. It's almost boring. It's like, what are the, I have abandoned cart. If you abandon your cart, trigger a notification, hey, you abandoned your cart. That's going to drive sales It doesn't require a huge sexy thing. It doesn't even require a discount. It's just a reminder, you better get it. And there's so many ways to tag the customer journey, and that gives you an excuse to talk to them, and it's personalized, and therefore it gets read and opened.
Yeah, cool. Ted, how do you see the world?
Yeah, actually, at Rue, I would say we took a little bit of a different path than what Rich was talking about. In that, the idea here was that we wanted to test extreme personalization, and we tend to do those kinds of tests in a big way from the beginning. Meaning, we in this case, we took we sent a lot of communications out, mostly in email, but also through app pushes. And we took our sort of baseline email that we send out every single day at 11 a.m., which is our biggest money maker for us, and we decided that was the one we were going to target. So all the work that was done to try to do true one-to-one personalization was built on that particular foundation. Now, we didn't test it immediately against the entire audience of many millions of people. Obviously, we tested into it, but scale and business impact is always paramount in the thinking here. So that's the way we prioritize things. So that's where we started, and we've sort of evolved from there to other ways of personalization, including personalizing on the site as well as through communications.
Yeah. What are the thoughts you guys have on, one of the hotter areas around sort of one-to-one personalization has been, revisiting sort of a very, tried and true sort of approach to messaging, which has been around this A/B testing, right? And I don't want to get sort of too in the weeds, but there have been pretty significant, both advancements on the technology side as well as, customers seeing tangible improvement. At least, it's one that's near to my heart because we see it a lot in our base as well, where, this notion of sort of moving from A to B testing to more of A to E testing or N testing, if you will, where, the ability now to go rapid fire and test different messages is something you can do within seconds to find the winning variant, right? Whether you guys are using it or not, but as just sort of, very seasoned marketeers, like, is that something, what are your thoughts on embracing that, looking into it? What are your thoughts there?
I'll start. I mean, I think this just is another way to do A/B testing, but there's sort of, I think I do view one-to-one a little differently. A/B testing has been around for a long time, and I think it helps, especially when the frequency of communication from a marketer to a customer, when the frequency is constrained, it's very important that you A/B test to know which subject line and which message prevails. With one-to-one marketing, I think that what I've seen is that frequency isn't your biggest problem. In other words, that if you're really good at personalization, then you get permission to send more than you normally would send. But you still want to do testing. I think testing personalized notifications and messaging over a control group that got nothing, for example, is an interesting way to see clearly what the lift is. But but my experience, if the message is truly personalized and relevant, you can send it often, and in addition to other things that you may be seeing the customer. Yeah,
I really like the way you said that. One of the things that sort of expanded my mind in terms of how I think about this as well. So one of the things that we think a lot about is, if we truly can be much better at, right message, right place, right time, and we can personalize better, arguably you can get a lot more done by less messaging. But I like how you put it too, which is the flip side is true as well. If your messaging starts to get highly relevant, you are buying and earning your way, to be able to send more relevant messages. And in my mind, that's that holy grail where a message starts to look like information, right? Okay, we're going to move to the next one, behavioral segmentation. How will shifting from a demographic segmentation approach to a behavioral segmentation approach help marketeers strategize in terms of consumers as individuals? Ted, can you get us started on that?
Sure. So I would say we still do use some demographic information for things like our paid media strategy. There's some targeting and so I think more importantly maybe some suppression that we do based on demographic data that we've gathered over the years. But behavioral segmentation is so much more powerful, and as you were saying in the sort of introduction here, machine learning and the ability to have huge databases of data and tools to collect every action that somebody takes with you on the website or through communications has made it much easier to actually have all that behavioral data at your disposal, and then people put their actions speak much louder than sort of generic information about them, and so we have just that's how we've built all of our one-to-one segmentation. Is the demographics are not coming into it at all. It's really behaviorally based from all of those observations.
Yeah. So does it sound? Is it fair to say that? I mean, you at some point you made a sort of progression or a change as from demographic to behavioral. Or have you been, I'm just trying to understand, like, what were the triggers? Or was it one of those where you were like, look, the best I have right now is demographic, and the minute you started to see real behavioral, you sort of made the switch? Like, I'm trying to just understand, what was that pivot point?
Yeah, I think it was so the company, the company's been around for about 10 years, it will be 10 in April. The company was definitely founded on data and data-driven strategy and marketing. So yes, demographics and geographical information and things like that were sort of foundational at the beginning. But I think that especially over the last 5 years, there was a realization that we had to have an infrastructure to allow us to have access to that behavioral data, because just the small things we were doing, abandoned cart is an example, those kinds of behaviorally triggered kinds of communications. We also tested some things on the website that were behaviorally triggered, so based on actions that people were taking while they were interacting with us, having certain things pop up or recommendations change. We were slowly testing into some of those things, and we found, like everybody else does, that they're so much more powerful that then it became a big tidal wave of, okay, we need to be doing this much more broadly.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I think Brett's going to talk more about that. Brett, what are your thoughts on behavioral? You bring a different dimension to this, I think. But far away, how would you characterize the value?
I mean, what's interesting for us is, we're a Kahuna user, so behavioral segmentation is kind of native to us and to our product. We utilize some of the demographic data mostly for onboarding and acquiring customers, and we help that. We think that improves our ROI when in AdWords we're utilizing that data, or in Facebook. But then once they kind of come into our ecosystem, we're almost exclusively using behavioral data. I could see someone can argue and say, maybe you should be using both. With our user base size, 1 million users, by the time you start doing that, that would get really granular. And with the Kahuna infrastructure, you probably could do that. You talk about the one-on-one. I mean, you could, but you still would have to then create a lot of segments within each one of those behavioral groups. But yeah, so I mean, I think from my perspective, for all of the touch points that we're utilizing, all the campaigns that we do, the behavioral segmentation is native. So that's kind of the way Kahuna has set it up, was the way I've always thought about it and was kind of taught how to market to people.
Yeah. Awesome. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but like one of the things you were talking through, or both of you were talking through, when you guys, even Rich, when you were talking about those sort of virtues of behavioral, do you guys, when you think about doubling your user base, or if there's someone in the audience thinking about, what they're struggling with in 2018 is scale, they've got to really, I mean, everybody wants to grow their user base, so, but if that's like a primary thing, and by that I mean, it's not necessarily grow your user base, it could also mean, just scale the number of transactions, could be retention-based transactions, repeat transactions. Do behavioral segmentation concepts just lend itself better to scale? And I would love to see if you think that that's another sort of dimension. Brett, when you think about sort of the resources you have and the 100 things that you're trying to accomplish, when you try to sort of, double revenue, like what does behavioral segmentation do other than, does it help you scale marketing? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that's really interesting is, we're a small team, right? When we started with Kahuna in 2015, we were a 10-person team. I was kind of the, even as a co-CEO, I was the one doing the marketing and onboarding Kahuna. And, there was a lot of fine-tuning at first that I had to kind of fine-tune the way the campaigns were set up and what worked and what didn't work. I mean, the Kahuna platform itself ultimately does it all for me, but I did have to kind of manage and make some small tweaks. But so where I'm trying to get at, what was interesting is we're pushing out a new app update that we built out from scratch, and we had to go look through some of the campaigns. And what was fascinating is, now I have someone else, two other people that are looking at it, is that the campaigns that I ultimately kind of left up from when I set this up and I was happy with how the performance was, and I said, okay, these are the right campaigns, right? I mean, doing some of that one-to-one that we were talking about, someone, the Kahuna breaks things down into 4 users, right? You're an active user, you're a repeat, you're dormant, and some of these campaigns are built around that. So when someone becomes dormant after 2 months, we have some things that are actually going to, and it has some logic to make sure that some of the events are relevant to them still. But then it follows up with them because we haven't touched you for 2 months, and that's the timing in our minds that we thought was best. So you talked about scale. I mean, we have some of the same campaigns that we've created from a year ago that are still running today. So I thought that was kind of fascinating.
Cool. Awesome. Sorry, so we're going to move to the third question, which is AI and extreme personalization. So, how can, again, help us work through, as people in the seat there making it happen every day, all of you have, tasted sort of some version and some flavor of machine learning, whether you're testing it or you're actively using it or you wholeheartedly rely on it like Brett does. Let's talk a little about, what is the ability specifically for AI to help you take the guesswork out of marketing. Rich, let's start with you. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, whether you call it AI or data science or algorithms, it's all kind of the same thing to me. And I think it's clearly that, machines are smarter than humans. So, the question is, how do you integrate it into your team and your day-to-day work? At swap.com, we are in the business of secondhand clothes, and the thing is, every single item is unlike any other item, and there's over 2 million items. So if you think about what it's like to buy clothing from a new retailer, you'll have a drop down on the product page with 20 different sizes. So we use automation to automatically say, here's a blue shirt, here's 20 other sizes of that blue shirt, and based solely on the photo that we have. And so that's one foundation for marketing, to use AI to say, okay, if you are interested in these products, I can now associate them all together through machine learning with one another. Now I can make recommendations, so I can trigger emails and campaigns and site recommendations based on your interests, and all of that is also based on automation. And then, figuring out whom to send them to and when is also automation. So it's kind of the new way of thinking about marketing as a series of different algorithms, and it's about having everything set up in your data, and then having a few smart people that can help you with who do data science for a living. It doesn't require a huge team, I think, to do it well, but it's sort of complementary. I mean, one day I think it will replace a lot of the the marketing that we do today.
Yep. Cool. Ted, what are your thoughts on this?
So I'll go back to that example I gave. When the decision was made to start to think about trying to truly personalize the 11 a.m. marketing campaign that we send out, and that campaign for us basically is sort of like our, the mall is open communication every day that says, these are all the new stores that are open. So there are generally between 14 and 30 new boutiques, as we call them, that launch every day. So we're not talking about a huge number, but if you think about sending somebody 30 different brands or boutiques in their email, the question is, how do you show them the ones that are going to be of most interest to them up front, in the subject line, things like that, so that you're getting their attention, and not putting, for example, a bunch of women's brands in a man's email unless he's already buying from those brands. That's a great example of where we actually use behavior, not gender. But so that's where it started, and we didn't have a data science team. We actually outsourced the development of an algorithm to do this, to sort through and look at member behavior to figure out what's the right way to sort all of those boutiques in that communication for each individual member. So we outsourced it, and we launched it in 2016, again, as a test. So, we took different member segments we have, and we carved out different portions of them, and we started testing. And the default is basically a manually sorted list of those boutiques that somebody on the merchandising team does every morning. And it took a while for us to hit statistical significance and find the results, but we did get some good results, and then we let it run over time to show that it was persistent. It wasn't, only true during holiday or only true, for a couple of weeks. And over time, we started to realize we needed to build a data science team. So we, to Rich's comment, we don't have a huge data science team, but we have hired people over the last couple of years to play that role. Yep. And we're slowly starting to use AI for other things like your site experience.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. I mean, it's something obviously we think about day in and day out, and in our cases we try to even automate some of that. But I love the fact that that is an extremely viable and alternative way of hitting it. We're going to move to the next question. I just wanted, in the interest of time, make this a bit of a lightning round. So what is the one thing, I'll just go around the table real quickly. When it comes to Amazon, what's the one thing you think they do really well that, brands looking to sort of play need to understand, emulate, versus sort of just, I think, the way the press and the media works today, which is just like, well, they're just unstoppable, this, that, the other, right? You guys all wake up every day. You guys are willing to carve your own space out. What is the one thing that you think you're doing to level the playing field and keep these guys at bay? Brett, maybe I'll start with you. Brett, your business is a little different from what Amazon typically does, but what are your views? What are the things? How do you look at Amazon?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because Amazon does sell tickets in Europe. They're not doing it in the U.S. They did recently try to make a play and now have backed away. So the ticketing space, it's a tough space. It would be intimidating if Amazon came into play. I guess, as I'm hearing you answer the question, I'm thinking, where we would have to do them, would outdo them, would, one be on some of the algorithms, and someone could say, yeah, Amazon could easily do that. But there is a lot of industry experience and expertise here. And also we're not confined by the Amazon platform itself. So, buying a ticket, yeah, sure, it may sound simple to you. Every venue is a different stadium. It's just a very unique, different buying experience. So I ultimately think that, besides price, which, once again, if they want to come in, and this is why it's intimidating to us, but if they want to come in and offer to their Prime members, the same tickets that we have without any margin at all, that that would be definitely scary. But we would need to beat them on the user experience and customer support as well.
Perfect. Great. So, again, keep doubling down on personalization, getting closer to the consumer, and using both, I guess, web and engagement channels to do that, right?
Yeah, no, and when you talk about that sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead. Go ahead, Brett.
I was just going to say where I envision kind of the TickPick experience moving in future years is similar to an Uber example where, yeah, it's personalized to you, which, we know data about you. We know what type of tickets you like. We know your kind of price point. So you're not, you think about how much time people spend on buying tickets. It's a lot of time that they spend choosing which tickets they're going to buy. That's the point of our algorithms to help them. But I could see our product going, here is the ticket you should buy. So, and once again, Amazon would be good there. But I think we can beat them there and be really hard to turn their platform into that type of user experience.
Cool. Rich, give me a 60-second answer. Like, what do you think's big? What would you share? About how you guys, would keep an Amazon at bay.
Well, sell stuff they can't carry. That helps.
I love it.
There's, and as an e-commerce retailer, everyone should be concerned, of course, and I think, but you need to beat them on some axis. So we picked a market where you can buy clothes that are like new for a tenth to a third of the price, and you can't find this stuff unless you're sourcing secondhand clothing, and sourcing it is fundamentally different than merchandising brand new clothing. It's a totally different ballgame. You're talking about getting boxes from customers. You have no idea what's in it until the moment you open it. You've got warehouse workers opening them and then categorizing them, professionally photographing them, packaging them professionally. Everything's listed on the site for sale, and nothing has a barcode. So it's a fundamentally different way to do e-commerce because of the way it's sourced. And so all the inventory, and every single item we have is unique. So there's really no two of a kind exactly. So, and our customers, they want that fun treasure hunt. And so we're giving them something they can't get on Amazon.com.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. Ted, you want to close this question out for us? What are your thoughts?
Sure, just a few quick things. So first of all, we use them as a marketplace, and we've found that to be very successful. So we'll continue to do that. Secondly, I think the thing that we most took away from Amazon for ourselves is when they introduced Prime, they took away some of the friction of buying on Amazon, and we are looking to emulate that. So we tried to eliminate barriers. Shipping cost is the #1 barrier for us, for members. So we've done a bunch of things to try to reduce or eliminate that friction, similar to an Amazon Prime. And so that was a good learning for us from them, where they really pioneered. And then the last thing I'd say is I do think long term against Amazon, it's going to have to be, the way you're going to succeed is by really knowing your customers better than they can, because your customers spend more of their time with you when it comes to the particular products or services you sell. so it's got to all go back to collecting the data and reacting to it and being very, very smart using AI to personalize. That's what's going to be the key.
That is a fantastic note to end this section on. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to switch to do a deep case study for a second. We're a few minutes with Brett and then bring the panel back for the Q&A. I'll read out some of the questions. So, as I set this up for Brett, Brett's going to walk through a sort of a detailed case study of, how they have approached this transformation, how they've entered extreme, it's on a personal note, it's extremely inspiring for me to have a customer like Brett just taking on something that is, pretty daunting, because he and his co-founders and his team truly believe that there's still another very unmet need in terms of, being able to consume and buy tickets in a more personalized way. And so, we're privileged to have TickPick as a customer. The backdrop against which sort of the one-to-one personalization comes to life for TickPick and for our other customers are based on a whole slew of personalization capabilities, I'll just sort of hone in on a couple here, and we can use that as a basis for Brett to describe how they run their operations. Message variant optimization is one of the key things for us. We truly believe that, A/B testing is sort of an artificial limitation placed by technology and the manual work. Today, the machines let us scale it to A/N testing, and within seconds, you can figure out which one works. So that's a core component of what we have. The second one is channel optimization. If your consumer, is doing research from 5 to 7 p.m. on her iPad when she's on the subway, New York subway going home, then, today's marketing needs to be intelligent enough to say, don't throw a buy button right now, nurture the content, help make the decision. And maybe it's Sunday morning where it's on the laptop and emails required to sort of close with an offer. That is sort of an example of modern marketing that comes from, the right sort of channel optimization. The second thing is, and the next thing is again, just sending it optimally, which device, which time, being able to orchestrate all of that where, you've decoupled your architecture, if you will, from being sort of very email centric and monolithic, where you've got part of your system that can listen to, events from any device and any channel, and then let the machines decide, regardless of where the event and the behavior segmentation came from, still make the call on which is the right device at a certain time. So that sort of scales, today we're talking mobile and we're talking email and SMS and, and chatbots. Tomorrow we're going to talk AR, VR, and a whole slew of other engagement channels. How are you decoupling understanding, orchestration, and then channel delivery. And then the last one is which is a core sort of design ethos of Kahuna is we're not centered on rules based, we're centered on goals based, right? Where you tell the system what is my goal, and you let them you always have the right to override a machine in Kahuna, but you let the machine tell you, okay, based on your goal, this is how I think you should optimize it. Do you want to hit go, and you always have that ability to let the machine scale faster. So those were kind of the sort of the basis of how this works. I wanted to give it to Brett to just talk about some of the metrics there that TickPick has achieved. But Brett, walk us through sort of the problem that and then the situation, and then the things that you would like the audience to learn if they're considering moving to more of a sort of one-to-one personalization model. So I'll hand it over to you to walk us through this.
Yeah, so going back to 2015, it's kind of interesting to think how advanced we are from a technology perspective on product and pushing the envelope on kind of having best-in-class app, but at the same time then having our email marketing completely separate from everything else. So, we have our databases, transactional databases, all the emails being saved there. I was running me and one other person were running the emails and through ActiveCampaign. At the time, there was really no integration into ActiveCampaign. So we wanted to start doing some, simple onboarding emails. And that was just like the start of the problem, which is like, okay, so we have to manually upload these there. And, we kind of hacked together some way to do that. And then we said, okay, we want to start we know these people looked at these tickets. We know they, bought tickets for this. Let's start doing some sort of recommendation email. And the process that we had to run through ActiveCampaign. It had to be done overnight because it took so long. I can't tell you why it took so long. It made no sense. But so we had so many problems and such basic stuff that any marketer is going to say that they're doing some of these types of onboarding emails. So that was the first thing. The next piece is the app. We had great success with the app. We weren't doing any push at all. So that's ultimately what led me to kind of find Kahuna at the time, which is, hey, we need to start doing push. And when I kind of did that, we said, okay, we're going to only do this once. We're going to find the right partner that we're going to be able to do email and push and whatever's kind of the next thing as well. We do the right thing. So that's how we kind of found Kahuna. And then I think there's simple things like I would go through the Kahuna data, and one of the things I would look to see, what were good users, what were bad users. And one of the things I would see was, okay, if someone didn't sign up on our onboarding screen in the app, which you're not required to, if someone didn't, it was a really bad sign. The likelihood of them converting was at least 2 times more if they actually did sign up and give us their email. So this is kind of a little bit of a chicken and egg problem, but one of the things I set up with Kahuna was then I was doing a certain push to them to try to get that sign up as an easy first win, because it also helps the checkout flow if they have that email put in there already. It's just one piece of data. For our checkout flow, it allows Apple Pay if their email's in there already. If not, then you got to get their email there. And that was one of the first campaigns and a wildly successful campaign. The engagement rates were around 70% on the campaign, and then you could see we had a 44% increase in signups. And that was such an easy win. Kahuna optimized the time of, from when they download the app to when they kind of closed out that last session, how long until you should send that kind of push. And I don't know about you guys, but sometimes I'll use my competitor as an example. I'll go on StubHub. I'm looking at Super Bowl tickets to price shop, make sure we're cheaper than them. And I close the app, and 10 seconds later, I get a push that says, "Don't forget your Super Bowl tickets." And that's a really frustrating push. So, I know Kahuna's solution there is looking at the time when they should send that one on top of 5 different messages that we were, talk about A/B testing, ABCDE testing, and ultimately optimizing which was the best push and when's the best time to send that. So that was one example. You talk about purchases here. The amount of campaigns that we have set up is a lot, so there's a lot of different pieces I can talk about. See if I could pull up that exact one. Here was, our repeat rates are around 30-35%. I think everyone's goal is to increase conversions, increase, retention rates. And this is some of the campaigns I talked about before, is when there's a dormant user, when to ping them and when to follow up with them again, and just having relevant touch points with them. So we were able to go using the Kahuna system one time kind of create these re-engagement push campaigns that have been wildly successful. And I like to even speak about one of my own personal experiences with TickPick, which was, I obviously use the app. And, one day I walk out, I get onto the train to head home, and then I got a push message. And it was while I was on my commute home for TickPick. And the timing was perfect, because if I had gotten that push message while I was at my desk at the office, there's no way I was going to open it or even see it. But the timing was perfect. So Kahuna knew that, hey, this is the time Brett uses this app occasionally. If you're going to send him a message, send it to him then. So it kind of just nailed the timing, and it was a revalidation for me of like, wow, this stuff actually works. Anything? Awesome. I know we're running late on time, so maybe. No,
we'll just move to Q&A, and maybe some people get some time to process questions or two, and we'll pick them up in the Q&A. But Brett, I really appreciate that. Thank you. Okay, so so just getting the Q&A, the first interesting question I got here, which is quite apt for this crowd, is I'm wondering what are some of the things that marketeers of marketplace businesses do differently than a traditional e-commerce brand? Any one of you guys could pick that up. Rich, you want to give it a shot? Like, what you were talking about sort of like, you have to understand our world, stuff just comes in boxes from customers. We got to like get it ready. As a marketeer, where you've got sort of, I guess, to some degree of marketing both on the supply side and the demand side, like, what are the one or two big things that you think a marketeer of marketplaces has to do differently? It could be a metric, it could be what they measure, it could be how they campaign. Take it in any direction you'd like.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. You've got to market to both, and you've got to balance the two. And before Swap.com, I should mention I was at an online food delivery company where you've got to market to get the restaurants, to get the drivers, and to get people to order food. So there's actually a three-way marketplace in the food delivery business. So yeah, it's something I've been doing for a while, and it's all the more important that your data is strong. And kind of I'll go back to the theme of this webinar. If you don't know what your customers want and when they want it, then you don't also know how to source correctly. And most big retailers, if you don't look at like marketplaces, they pay merchandising teams to be really good at predicting trends. And they're looking at data, of course, as well and making buying decisions. And in some cases, they're manufacturing that from scratch, and they're sourcing the materials in the case of like apparel. But what's happened with like a marketplace is that burden falls more to the marketing team because there is no manufacturing per se. You've got to market to your supply chain and say, work with us and send us your stuff or do business with us. So it's the same database, essentially, and the same predictive marketing that goes into both demand and supply.
That's awesome. Yeah. Ted, what are your thoughts on that? I'll give Brett a bit of a breather. Ted, what are your thoughts on on one or two of the big striking?
I don't know if I have too much to say. Certainly at Rue is an e-tailer. We don't have a marketplace. But I think I would echo what Rich said. I think it does shift the burden of how you have to engage your customers or your members significantly because it's much more about interaction between them as opposed to you pushing things to them.
Yeah. All right. Ted, so we probably have one last question, but Ted, I'm going to stick with you for a minute. One of the questions we also got was this whole notion of, as people sort of dip their toes or go, make a decision to go away from, old school sort of rule-based systems or, that are more sort of, email-centric or batch and blast or what have you, and start looking at one-to-one personalization. We spend a lot of time with our customers on helping them sort of make that transition. We don't require and mandate that it has to be, turn everything off so you can use Kahuna. Have you had any experience sort of, on bringing in some of the newer ways, some of these newer technologies, but yet holding on to the older stuff that you have? Because like you said, there are certain use cases where, not doing excessive personalization also helps. Like any thoughts on how to keep both those worlds up and running?
Sure. I mean, I think a lot of it comes down to the way you prioritize the efforts. So I think back at the first question, Rich and I sort of our companies had different approaches for how we decided to start with personalization.
Yeah.
Here at Rue, as I said, we started with where we thought we were going to be able to have the biggest impact with personalization, and we tested into it. So it's not like we were gambling, millions of dollars out of the gate, but that's where we started. But if you look at, in general, I would say almost every interaction you have with a customer or a prospect, but certainly more for your customers, could be personalized to some extent or another. And so you've got to be disciplined about figuring out, well, where do we start? Where are we going to have? And from us, again, it's are we going to have the biggest impact, and prioritizing those things. Most of our interactions are still not personalized. And so we are methodically, I would say, we're trying to knock off, 2 to 5 new interactions a year where we test into personalizing those interactions. So it absolutely can be done, and for many companies should be done in a methodical way, and it does not have to be a rush.
I couldn't agree. I mean, that's a great closing point. I couldn't agree more. We've seen literally, scores of our customers who are like Brett, that are natively digital and start with that world, but we have a whole boatload of customers that say, hey, I want to hold on to my older ESP, like a Responses or whatever, for certain use cases, and Kahuna powers all of the real-time stuff, all the daily stuff, and wherever, repeat purchases are going to just be done better with the one-to-one sort of decision engine turned on. All right. We're right at the top of the hour. I want to thank everybody. Hand it back to Chris. But deep appreciation from us for all of you guys to take part, and hopefully the audience got a lot out of it. Thanks again, Chris. I'll give it back to you.
Thanks, Samir, and thanks everybody. That's all the time we have for today's webinar. If you weren't able to get to your questions today, we'll be in touch shortly to continue the conversation. I want to take a moment to thank the audience for attending this webinar and our amazing speakers for participating. Following the webinar, we would like to hear your feedback, so please participate in the survey to share any comments or suggested topics that you would like us to discuss in future webinars. This presentation will soon be available for on-demand view. You will all receive that information to view the on-demand recording shortly, so keep an eye out for that. And we'd like to thank our sponsor, Kahuna, for a great event. To learn more about Kahuna and their solutions, visit their website at kahuna.com. Thank you and have a great day.